Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video I am going to be doing a 5x5 with my favorite romance trope. So if you are unaware, my 5x5 is a series in which I am trying to find 5 5-star reads. I have not succeeded thus far, and each of these has a different theme. I'll put a link to the playlist of the previous ones and the cards right here if you want to go check those out. This month it is going to be enemies to lovers. It's the month of love, and I've just been really craving some romance, so this was a perfect excuse to read nothing but them. As usual, I'm going to give you guys a rundown of all of the books I'm planning to read, and then I will do a 50% update of each book with an estimated rating, and then a final update with an actual rating. Since enemies to lovers is one of my favorite tropes, I am going to use that as a pretty important point in my rating system for this video because, trust me, it can definitely be done wrong. Let's do a little rundown of all the books I'm planning to read. First up, we have Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I have heard a lot of good things about this one. This actually was up against Honeymooners by Christina Lauren, but those on my Instagram decided this one was gonna win. I believe the story is following a woman named January whose father has recently died and left her this beach house. She goes there intending to try and write her new romance novel because she's been dealing with writer's block. She meets her rude neighbor, and he is actually an author of literary fiction. The two decide to make a competition and switch genres to see who can write the best book. I think they go on like different research dates and things, and you know. Next up, I'm going to be reading Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert, and I believe this is a LGBT plus new adult story following these two guys who play some kind of a tabletop game put into a road trip together to a convention across the country. I don't know if it's like Comic-Con or A-Con or something like that, but I do know that usually when the two guys play their game, they are always butting heads. Next up, I am going to be reading Loathe at First Sight by Suzanne Park, and we're following a young woman who is a video game producer. She's usually having to deal with all of the sexism in her industry. However, she ends up spearheading this one project, and one of the interns on the team is actually the new hire who is her boss's uncle. Who is her boss's nephew. She ends up dismissing him because she doesn't think he can actually do his job, and he ends up being a bit of a thorn in her side. I'm also going to be reading The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I've heard tons of praise about this and also a few rant reviews, so I'm pretty intrigued to see on which side I will fall. This story is following the two assistants for two separate CEOs at a publication company. I said advertising in my TBR. It's a publication company. Both of the characters absolutely hate each other and usually spend a majority of their days tormenting each other. They end up getting pitted against each other for a possible promotion, and it just gets worse. Finally, I'm going to be reading Once in Future by A.R. Capetta and Cori McCarthy. This is a LGBT plus gender bent retelling of the Arthurian legend in a sci-fi futuristic world. That right there has me hooked. I'm so intrigued. I believe in this story, Merlin actually ages backwards, and every generation Arthur is reincarnated into someone new. Every time Merlin has to try and find that Arthur, train him, they have to conquer whatever evil is taking over and unite humanity. Once they finally get to do that, Merlin will be able to finally rest. However, they are up to the 42nd reincarnation and something new has finally happened. Arthur has reincarnated into a woman. On top of that, there is a giant corporation that is trying to take over the universe, so they definitely have their work cut out for them. Okay, y'all, so on that note, I will update you guys when I hit the 50% mark of the first book. Hey y'all, so I have hit the halfway point in Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert, and I'm really enjoying this one so far. As I mentioned previously, this is focusing on two guys as they do a road trip to some kind of a nerdy convention. I dropped both Comic-Con and A-Con as possibilities, but in reality, it seems more reminiscent to a gaming competition. Specifically, the game they play is called Odyssey. It is card-based and fantastical, sort of similar to Magic the Gathering from what I have picked up. I don't play Magic the Gathering, but I know people who have, so I kind of understand it and can see the similarities. On top of that, there's just some other fun, like, nerdy references here and there. At one point, one of our main characters, Alden, comments that he thinks that the new Captain Kirk is hot, and, like, honestly, who can blame him? Chris Pine. On that note, let's jump into our main two characters. We are actually alternating between the points of view of Alden and Conrad. Alden is 23, he is Jewish, and he has two moms and is at least somewhat interested in men. I've really been enjoying Alden's point of view because although he might come across as kind of blunt and rude in Conrad's perspective. In reality, we see that he has trouble picking up on social cues here and there, and he also deals with pretty serious anxiety. There's also been mention of the fact that he might be an undiagnosed neurodiverse individual, so that's some nice representation there. His brain is just so analytical, and he really follows by the rules, and Conrad kind of just thinks he has a stick up his ass. On the opposite side, Conrad is the laid back, kind of partier guy, goes with the flow. However, he is dealing with some drama in his personal life after a fallout with his parents that led to him being cut off. It has been explicitly stated that Conrad is gay, but he just cannot stand Alden when we start this story. While Alden is very like calculating in all of his moves in the Odyssey game, Conrad is very like fly by the seat of his pants, and I just love the contrast between these two characters. With that, the fact that we alternate between their points of view has been so fun, particularly when it comes to arguments. They just have fantastic banter overall. They are actually competing against each other in the Odyssey game. I think that just kind of amps up the whole enemies aspect. But with that, they are trapped in a car together, so they are constantly having to actually interact. And with that, they are slowly starting to open up. They're actually getting to know one another and revealing secrets that one another hasn't really said to anyone else. And I love those interactions just as much. However, I do really appreciate that we haven't just jumped right into the lovers aspect. There was a possible kiss scenario, but quite quickly after that, another argument ensued, and I think it's just keeping that like raised blood pressure going between the two of them, but also the passion. The passion. This does kind of have a everybody's gay trope going on. As I mentioned, both Alden and Conrad are at least somewhat interested in men. Plus, another person on their Odyssey team is named Peyton, and they are non-binary, using they them pronouns. So just overall, great representation. Finally, something I've never really thought about before is I have realized that New Adult is a up-and-coming section of books, and I just really have never sought it out before. But reading this, where the two main characters are actually my age and I am at a similar point in my life as them, I've been enjoying it so much more because I can really understand their mindset that they have, particularly when it comes to the terrifying void that is post-college. For the time being, as I mentioned, I've been really enjoying this. I don't want to put my hopes up too high already, so we're gonna go with an estimated 4-star rating. Hopefully the ending of this will stay strong and I will love it. Hey y'all, so please excuse this. I got a chemical peel today, and could I probably have waited on doing this update? Yes. Am I going to? No. I've officially finished Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert, and I really enjoyed this. Plus, because of this, I'm definitely gonna start looking into more a new adult. Given that this was a new adult contemporary romance, I didn't follow all of this teenage drama for a simple kiss in the end, which I really appreciate. This did get a bit steamy, which I wasn't particularly expecting. Moving forward, this continued to have some of those different tropes you see in fanfiction a lot, and I loved that. For example, at one point we actually got to see the whole "there's only one bed" situation between the two boys, and that was just highly amusing. As I mentioned in the last update, I really appreciated that we hadn't just already jumped into the lovers section of their relationship. We were still kind of in that enemies transitioning to friends scenario, and that thankfully stuck true until probably about 60% into the book, until finally each of the boys started to realize that they were actually attracted to one another, and then we got the whole situation of them thinking, why am I attracted to this person? They used to annoy the crap out of me. I love that because it seems actually realistic to an enemies to lovers romance. Once they did become coupley, they were absolutely adorable, but they actually hadn't discussed what the label was for their relationship, so they just both kept referring to each other as my guy. That's adorable. Naturally, since the main focus of the story is romantic, of course there had to be some third act drama, and usually I find that that's normally due to miscommunication, and while that did play a factor, for the most part in this, it was more so focused on the fact that both of the boys needed to improve themselves before they could officially be invested invested in their relationship, and I really liked that. Conrad needed to realize that he is capable of love and being loved, while Alden had to figure out that he needs to push past his anxiety sometimes to get what he wants. Along with that same line is the fact that each of the boys actually influenced one another so that they improved from their earlier situations at the start of the book. And I think that's just like great writing, seeing the characters work off each other in that way. My only real complaint was I was thinking that it was going to become a bit repetitive in the road trip situation. Thankfully, that never happened. However, I do think when they finally got to the convention, the first 2 days was a bit repetitive. We just constantly keep hearing, oh, we went to this match and we played and we won. We went to this match and we played and we won. And in the end, I did really enjoy this. I think I'm gonna go with 4.5 stars because I did have that one downside, but overall, this was a very fun read. It had great diversity, it was romantic, it was sweet, and I think it had a good message in the end. On top of that, however, I have also hit the quarter point in The Hating Game by Sally Thorne, and although technically I usually only update you at the halfway point, I am sorry to say I think this is going to be my first DNF for a 5x5 video. So I was curious going into the start of whether I was going to fall into the side that liked this book or the side that hated this book. I wouldn't say I hate this book, but I just don't appreciate the writing of my favorite trope in this way. Let me explain. Starting out in the beginning of this book, the two main characters, Lucy and Josh, bounce back and forth off each other, have tons of banter. They are just honestly a HR person's nightmare. That was entertaining. However, I think there is a distinct difference between teasing and bickering and bullying. Making it turn from a enemies to lovers to more of a bully romance, I don't really like those. I think I've read one ever that I thought handled it correctly. We are actually in Lucy's perspective, and at the start of the book, she definitely has this hate sex mentality towards Josh because she doesn't like him, she doesn't think he's a good person, but she's attracted to him and she's not happy about that. Love that. However, Lucy tells Josh that she has a date, and for some reason he becomes incredibly jealous and possessive of her. Bit odd, comes out of left field. They are in the elevator going down to the parking garage, and Josh just kind of scoops her up. She is described as being scared that he is going to hurt her, and he doesn't pick up on that fact and instead chooses to kiss her. Usually those kind of situations, tensions are high, passions are going, and elevator kiss scenes are my favorite. It actually took me a bit to kind of figure out what was off in that scene that made me feel uncomfortable, but I think it's just the fact that there's very much a lack of consent because Lucy's first instinct is to be fearful. He doesn't notice. He just pushes through with what he wants, and I don't like that. After that happens, Lucy ends up going on her date. While she's there, the other guy is calling her beautiful, and she just can't take the compliment. She ends up excusing herself to the bathroom, and Josh shows up again. And while they're talking, she starts crying and actually comments that he has broken her down so much that she doesn't think she's beautiful. And that to me means he has clearly broken her spirit, and that's not romantic. That's abusive and toxic and sad. After that, I really just don't think I can push forward through the rest of this book. I'm really sad about it because I'd heard lots of good things on this, and it's very obviously one of my favorite tropes, but I just don't like the way it's been written so far in this, so yeah, I'm gonna have to DNF it. Also, just a little heads up, I initially started this via audiobook. The narrator reads every piece of dialogue with this very like sultry and sexual voice, so it makes everything that's said sound like an innuendo, and it was very weird, and I did not like it. I did not like that at all. Here's hoping that the next book I pick up will be better than this one. Hey y'all, so I have officially hit the halfway point in Beach Read, and I need you to know that it was so hard for me to put this down at the halfway point. It was very difficult. I wanted to keep reading so badly, but I did it. I did it for you. Say thank you. Also, let's look at the amount of notes I have already. Only at the halfway point. I only got like an inch left of space. Lord. Okay, so starting from the top, we are in January's perspective. She meets her rude neighbor who is blasting music at 12 o'clock at night. It's just a bad first impression already. Got a grumpy Gus, got a kind of tipsy January. Not a good combination just to start. However, we find out this isn't even a first impression. It's a second first impression. Because turns out both of these characters actually went to college together, and ever since Gus made a snide comment about January's writing, she has had this whole perceived competition with him and named him her mortal enemy. I love it. This really just stems from something in January's brain, but I love that there's actually a basis for the fact of why she doesn't like him. So naturally, right out of the gate, we have fantastic banter, usually revolving around the stereotypes of each of their genres. Since they're both writers in very different fields, they obviously can nitpick at each other. However, it just got better whenever there's the addition of an actual competition between them when Gus suggests that they switch the genres for the summer. I think it just makes their interactions all the more amusing. Plus, it forces them to have to spend time together because they go on these little like research dates. So he will take her to go do something that he would usually do to research for one of his like sad books. And then the next day, she will take him on some corny romantic date. We are getting to see them slowly get to know each other. Even though they're doing that, there's still some banter going on, which I do like. I was a little worried we were gonna jump right into the lovers section because there's something that definitely happens maybe like 40% in where it seemed like, whoa, well, we're out of enemies territory. However, I will say, Emily Henry might have done something to backtrack us into enemies and just elongate that process, and I'm ready for it. Don't know that for sure yet. Obviously, I had to stop reading. Already, there is a bit of that whole storm cloud and sunshine trope going on. As I mentioned, January is having to deal with some family drama, and I gotta say that is keeping me engaged just as well because what's just going on? It's crazy. It's crazy. However, with that possible catalyst that might have shifted us back into enemies territory, we might be finding out something that has been going on in Gus's life to see some drama on his side. I am a bit sad that with that we haven't seen from Gus's perspective, and I'm curious on how it's gonna go in the future. I'm loving this. I'm loving this so much. I don't want to do an estimated 5-star rating because it never works out well for me in the end, but yeah, we're gonna say estimated 5-star rating. We're going with it. I might regret this later. Let's hope not. Hey y'all, so I have officially finished Beach Read by Emily Henry, and I did it again. Apparently I can't estimate 5 stars because it's just jinxing myself in the future. Not to say I didn't still enjoy this book, because I did, but it wasn't a 5 stars, spoiler alert. I guess let's start with the complaints. In the end, I just really wish that we had stayed in the enemies section a bit longer. I commented in my last update that I thought we were gonna kind of regress back to that stage, but in reality, we kind of just moved forward with a friendship, which then obviously shifted into lovers, and that's fine, but it wasn't really what I was wanting. I just loved the snappy banter and like this contrast between January being incredibly attracted to Gus while also not being able to stand him. And I wanted more of it. This also kind of read like second chance romance, which I do like that trope, so I think for this video, I did have to kind of separate that in my brain that I was reading this for enemies to lovers, not for second chance romance. Also, miscommunication was used here. Well, not even really miscommunication, more of like selective sharing. It did get a little annoying at points, but I understood why it happened. And then finally, January just kind of started to get on my nerves in the latter half of the story, particularly in the fact anything she did, she just kind of started crying. However, on the opposite side, more positives with this. I did love the fact that it kind of had that whole second chance romance thing going on, particularly in the fact that like both of these characters needed to address some of the trauma that they had been dealing with and kind of grew from that based on the influence the other had on them. I think overall this was just a lot deeper than most romance books I read. I really enjoyed that aspect, particularly when it came to the whole family dynamic that January is struggling with throughout this. I really loved seeing how she is is trying to deal with her grief over losing her father while also being furious with him in this situation and not being able to have a full-out conversation with him. Also, the cult aspect that I wasn't expecting to kind of become a subplot. Gus is using a cult that was from the area they're staying in as research for his book. Wasn't expecting that in a romance, but cults are fascinating, so I was here for that. Finally, something I didn't really think about in the process of reading this, but when I read the acknowledgements at the back, I did realize that this book is also just about writer's block and how to handle that, trying to diversify yourself while also staying true to your style, and I really thought that was interesting. I used to write a good amount. I don't currently, but still something I could definitely relate to because, bro, writer's block sucks. I did really enjoy this, but as I said at the beginning, it wasn't a 5-star read in the end. I think I'm gonna go with like 4.5 stars. I still did really enjoy this, but this was such a good read. I've already recommended it to 3 people. If you're wondering why same makeup, same setup, but different outfit, it's because I finally got comfortable and took off my work clothes. Hey y'all, I have officially hit the halfway point in Once and Future by A.R. Capetta and Cori McCarthy, and I don't know what to make of this. First, let's talk about the fact of the enemies to lovers aspect. So obviously our main character is Ari, who is supposed to be Arthur. Naturally, her love interest has to be Guinevere. But of course, Merlin is trying to keep the two separated because he knows Gwyn will in some way betray Ari, which will break her heart and possibly have bigger repercussions for whatever big quests they are going on. But naturally, of course, there is chemistry between Ari and Gwyn, and they quite quickly couple up. I don't even know if I would really call this enemies to lovers. We are told that the two women have some kind of a past. Gwyn is actually the queen of this world that is basically a giant Renaissance fair or like a huge medieval times. Once Ari and Gwyn are in the same room together, things escalate quite quickly in their relationship. In fact, in terms of romance, almost every character within this falls somewhere within LGBT+ and is paired off with someone else. Not a problem with that. Don't mind the everybody's gay trope. However, I don't think it's really necessary for everyone to have some love interests that they're trying to get with. The other problem is as soon as that happens, it's like hormones are just flying and all they can think about is sex. That gets tiring pretty fast. There's just so much else going on in this book. I really don't know what it's trying to be. There's the romantic elements, there's like a possible war outbreak, a revolution, there's a prison break rescue, going on a quest to try and save the universe. There's this all-powerful corporation called Mercer, which is essentially trying to take over the universe one planet at a time. They have basically made a monopoly on all major goods. They, of course, have some kind of a war going on with Ari's home planet of Ketch. Also, quick side note, Matthew Mercer is the DM in Critical Role, so every time we meet a character who works for the Mercer Corporation, I just imagine Matthew Mercer in a new outfit doing a new accent every single time. I think the writing style throughout this has been pretty entertaining. It's very comedic. I like how they had Merlin age backwards, so he is now a 17-year-old. Since he's lived throughout all of these different time periods, he will make funky little pop culture references here and there. Some of them land, some of them don't. For the time being, I just don't know where this is going. And that's kind of what's keeping me intrigued. I also just want to see what more happens between Ari and Gwyn that made somebody label this as enemies to lovers, which going off that just means we need more sapphic enemies to lovers stories because it took me quite a while to find this one, and for the time being, don't think it was properly labeled. I guess for now I'm gonna go with like a 3-star. Don't know what's happening in this. And I don't know where we're gonna go from here. Hey y'all, so I have not finished Once and Future. Unfortunately, I've decided to DNF yet another book. It's really unfortunate that for this video, which is my favorite romance trope, I have now DNF'd 2 books. Welp. As I mentioned in my previous clip, I just didn't know where the story was going, and at the point I'm at, still don't. There is a sudden time jump from one chapter to the next, which genuinely made me drop the book and just ask, what?
because it made no sense. And in fact, from that time jump, what we've seen of the characters, nothing has changed. Obviously, this is based on the Arthenian legend, and if you know about that legend, there's something that happens in this that is the authors trying to revitalize it, but turn it into a plot twist. I don't like how it was done. It left a sour taste in my mouth, so much so that when I was listening to the audiobook, I actually yanked out my headphones. On top of the fact that the plot is all over the place, the pacing is so inconsistent, the characters just really don't have any kind of a personality at all. Some of the side characters' entire personalities are based around the fact their sexual orientation isn't straight, or possibly what their gender identification is. I love to see that diversity, but that doesn't add depth to a character. That same kind of writing is also why I just don't really care about the plot, because I don't care about the characters. This is just so sad to me because honestly, I loved the idea of a gender-bent, LGBT, sci-fi, futuristic, Arthenian legend retelling. That sounds awesome. This book did not live up to that. Here's another DNF. Hey y'all, I've officially hit the halfway point in Loathe at First Sight by Suzanne Park. Also, it's snowing, so I have this like really pretty aesthetic background for once. I believe this story is mostly marketed as a romance. The main genre it is listed as on Goodreads is romance. However, for the time being, I think the romance is kind of a background plot. The main story is more focusing on Melody is overheard discussing this joke video game idea she has by the CEO. And the game is basically a spin on all of the sexist female characters you see in older video games, where it is a post-apocalyptic world with zombies and all of the characters you are fighting with are male strippers. However, her CEO ends up using this idea and pitching it to the board to try and appear as though they are attempting to start marketing their games towards women. And to showcase the diversity the company is working on, they put Melody in charge of it. However, she is having to deal with a bunch of sexist assholes daily, lots of misogynistic comments, and there even ends up being a giant backlash on the internet from some misogynistic gamers. I do really appreciate that Suzanne Park is highlighting these issues in these male-dominated business worlds, as well as in the gaming community. Melody is definitely not a perfect character, and I've actually been very much enjoying watching her. She is incredibly judgmental, but at the same time, she cares a great deal what other people think of her. I do love the fact, however, that she has a backbone. She will stand up for what she believes in. Even when some of the board of the directors make sexist comments, she stands up to them and says, no, that's not okay, and here's why. On the opposite side, Nolan, our main love interest, is actually the nephew of the CEO, so Melody believes he got hired for pure nepotism. He is actually fairly smart and can do his job well, he just doesn't know what he wants to do with his life. When she gets booted out of her desk for him, they end up on a rocky start. As I said, Melody cares a great deal about what people think, so when Nolan gets put on her project, she assumes that all of the other men in the company are going to figure that she is getting preferential treatment that kind of lends towards why the fact she is constantly so cold to him. Nolan, however, is very kind and laid back guy, so he's constantly trying to win her over and do things that are nice for her. They just often don't end up that way. Melody is Korean, and we do get to see some of her interactions with her parents. They are a bit overbearing, but she still cares about them greatly anyway, and she wants to make them proud. In the enemies to lovers department, we were slowly starting to patch things up between Nolan and Melody, where they were starting to kind of hit that point of possibly being friends. But some drama happens again and they backslide into the enemy's territory. For the time being, I have been really enjoying this, although the romance isn't at the forefront of the story like I was assuming it was going to be. So I think for my estimated rating, I'm going to go with a 4 stars. We are still fairly early into the enemies shifting into friends stages, so there isn't a ton of chemistry between Melody and Nolan yet. However, I am hopeful that it will get better. Hey y'all, so I've officially finished Loathe at First Sight, and I did enjoy this. It just was not what I was expecting. Also, it's still snowing because I read majority of this book in one day. I do think that's a positive thing right there. As I mentioned previously, this is marketed as and marked as romance on Goodreads. However, I think in reality, this is more of a new adult contemporary with a romance subplot, because probably 75% of this book is much more just focusing on Melody trying to bring her game to success and get actual decent attention put on it, not just a bunch of trolls making fun of it and harassing her. While I loved that aspect of the story, I think it was really awesome getting to see her push against barriers, break down walls, shatter some glass ceilings. I loved the feminism, I loved the girl power, I loved pushing against that misogyny. Awesome, fantastic things. Just this did not have nearly the amount of romance I was hoping for. I do think this does fall into like the enemies to lovers trope, but it is much more of enemies to friends. They're still like pretty early on in that relationship. I really wasn't very convinced by the chemistry between the two of them in the end. That was really unfortunate. In fact, there was an epilogue and I was kind of expecting that we were gonna get that like, you know, cheesy, corny end of a romance story epilogue. But no, once again, it was very much focused on how Melody had grown within her company and the changes she was helping to implement, which again, all fantastic, all great. I was the vice president of women in business at my college, so I loved that kind of stuff. Just not what I was wanting here. I do think we can see some growth from Melody from where we start the book to where we end the book. By the end of the book, I think this kind of just wrapped up a bit too cleanly. I would have preferred to see a bit more of that ending drama. Oh, there's people. Why are you outside? It's freezing. Yeah, I just would have liked to see final big blowout, particularly between maybe say Melody and the sexist CEO. That would have been very fun. Yeah, so in the end, this was still good. I enjoyed it as a book, but in terms of like a romance, like 3.5 stars. I did enjoy what Suzanne Park did here, but it's just not at all what I went into this book expecting. All right, y'all, so in the end, unfortunately, this was a bit of a disappointing 5x5 for being focused around my favorite romance trope, and that's sad to say. However, I do still enjoy this trope, and thankfully, I don't think I burnt myself out on it. As always, thank you so much for coming to my channel today, guys. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Bye.